Hello everybody, welcome to my channel.
Charles Bronson, a rugged icon of American cinema. Charles Bronson, born Charles Dennis Buchinsky on November 3, 1921, in Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania, remains one of Hollywood's most distinctive and enduring screen legends. With his granite features, sparse dialogue, and commanding presence, Bronson forged a career that transformed him from a coal miner's son into an international symbol of gritty heroism and stoic masculinity. Early life and working-class roots. Bronson grew up in a large Lithuanian-American family in the coal mining region of Pennsylvania. Life was difficult, he was one of 15 children, and the family lived in severe poverty. As a young man, Bronson worked in the mines, an experience that instilled in him a steely toughness that later became central to his cinematic persona. His life changed dramatically when he joined the U.S. Air Force during World War II, serving as an aerial gunner. After the war, he drifted through various jobs until discovering a passion for acting, eventually studying in California and slowly building a career on stage and in film. Rising through the ranks of Hollywood, Bronson's earliest roles in the 1950s were often small parts, usually portraying soldiers, henchmen, or hardened criminals. His breakthrough came with his performance in The Magnificent Seven, 1960, where he played Bernardo O'Reilly, one of the gunfighters hired to protect a village. This role introduced audiences to his calm intensity and understated charisma. Throughout the 1960s, Bronson appeared in a number of acclaimed ensemble films, including The Great Escape, 1963, as Danny Tunnel King Valinsky, The Dirty Dozen, 1967, as Joseph Vladislaw, Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968, as Harmonica, one of his most celebrated performances, showcasing his ability to command a scene with minimal dialogue. His popularity surged in Europe, particularly in France and Italy, where audiences embraced his rugged screen presence long before mainstream American stardom fully followed. Superstardom in the vigilante era. Bronson reached a new level of fame in the 1970s when he starred in Death Wish, 1974, portraying Paul Kersey, an architect who becomes a vigilante after a brutal assault on his family. The film's controversial yet compelling portrayal of retribution struck a chord with audiences, turning Bronson into a major box office draw. The success of Death Wish spawned several sequels throughout the 1980s and 1990s, reinforcing his image as a tough, silent avenger willing to exact justice when the system failed. Other notable films from his peak years include Hard Times, 1975, Breakheart Pass, 1975, Telephone, 1977, The Mechanic, 1972. Later remade with Jason Statham, Mr. Majestic, 1974. A cult favorite. Bronson's performances were marked not by emotional volatility but by precision, a rare talent for conveying moral resolve and inner conflict through stoic restraint. Personal life and legacy. In 1968, Bronson married British actress Jill Ireland, with whom he frequently collaborated. Their partnership became one of Hollywood's most recognizable screen duos until her passing in 1990. Bronson later remarried and continued acting into the 1990s. Charles Bronson died on August 30, 2003, at the age of 81. Though he had stepped back from public life in his final years, his influence remained unmistakable. Enduring impact on cinema. Bronson's legacy rests on his unique ability to embody the silent, determined anti-hero. His work helped shape the evolution of the action genre, and he remains a touchstone for modern actors who portray rugged, morally complex characters. Today, Charles Bronson is remembered not only as a cinematic tough guy but also as a working-class American success story, a man who carried the hardness of his youth into a legendary screen career. His films, especially from the 1960s and 1970s, continue to captivate new generations seeking the raw authenticity he brought to every role. Crafting a unique screen persona. One of the most remarkable aspects of Charles Bronson's career was how effectively he developed a singular screen identity. Unlike many actors who relied on verbose dialogue or expressive theatrics, Bronson built his reputation on minimalism. His characters rarely needed long speeches, a tense stare, a measured breath, or the tightening of his jaw conveyed volumes. His acting style drew from his real-life experiences. Growing up in poverty, working in coal mines, surviving the war, and enduring hardship furnished Bronson with an authenticity that set him apart. He didn't play tough characters, he was tough, and audiences sensed that. Directors often spoke about his natural presence, noting that he brought a grounded seriousness that elevated even the simplest of scenes. Master of the antihero, Bronson became emblematic of the American antihero, particularly in the climate of the 1970s when audiences were drawn to flawed protagonists operating outside traditional moral boundaries. His characters often existed in morally ambiguous worlds where justice was personal and heroes were reluctant. Though Death Wish made him the face of the vigilante genre, Bronson's anti-heroes varied widely. Harmonica in Once Upon a Time in the West was mysterious and mythic, driven by vengeance but portrayed with poetic restraint. Cheney in Hard Times was a bare-knuckle fighter surviving through grit and dignity. Arthur Bishop in The Mechanic was a meticulous, introspective assassin with an almost philosophical approach to violence. These roles showcased Bronson's ability to blend toughness with psychological depth, a combination rarely matched in action cinema. International stardom and cultural impact. While Bronson eventually became a major star in the United States, his first true explosion of fame occurred overseas. European audiences, especially the French, regarded him as a charismatic outsider who seemed more raw and real than typical Hollywood leading men. In France, he was affectionately nicknamed Il était l'homme, he was the man, and magazines frequently highlighted his enigmatic charm. His popularity there foreshadowed the global rise of the rugged action hero archetype that would later define stars such as Clint Eastwood, Sylvester Stallone, and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Bronson's international appeal also stemmed from his distinctive looks, high cheekbones, a chiseled jaw, and deep-set eyes that spoke to a lifetime of struggle. His face made him instantly recognizable, and he became a template for the naturalistic, laconic action stars who followed. Collaborations with influential directors throughout his career. Bronson worked with some of cinema's most respected filmmakers, each bringing out different shades of his talent. John Sturges cast him in key ensemble films like The Magnificent Seven and The Great Escape. Sergio Leone showcased his mythic side in Once Upon a Time in the West, where Bronson's performance is regarded as one of the greatest in Western film history. Walter Hill directed him in Hard Times, exploring Bronson's capacity for emotional nuance beneath a stoic exterior. Michael Winner, though often controversial, forged one of Bronson's most enduring actor-director partnerships, particularly through the Death Wish franchise. These collaborations helped establish Bronson's versatility and expanded his reach beyond the American film system. Personal life and the influence of Jill Ireland. Bronson's marriage to British actress Jill Ireland was both a romantic and professional partnership. Appearing together in more than a dozen films, they formed one of the most recognizable screen couples of the era. Ireland often portrayed women connected to Bronson's characters, allies, love interests, or sources of emotional complexity. Their relationship deepened Bronson's humanity in the public eye. While his characters were often silent and hardened, those who knew him described him as private, loyal, and surprisingly gentle. Ireland's prolonged battle with cancer in the 1980s marked one of the toughest periods of his life, and Bronson remained steadfastly by her side until her passing in 1990. Later career and final years in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Bronson continued acting in films that kept him active in the action genre, particularly through his collaborations with Cannon Films. Though these later movies were often smaller in scale, they maintained his loyal fanbase and kept him visible in the public sphere. Bronson retired gradually from acting, appearing in his final film, Family of Cops 3, 1999, before stepping away from the spotlight. His later years were quiet, spent with his family away from Hollywood. He died on August 30, 2003, leaving behind a cinematic legacy that continues to influence filmmakers and actors today. A legacy that endures. Charles Bronson's impact on film is measured not only by the box office success of his movies but by the archetype he embodied, the strong, silent man whose morality was forged in hardship. His characters resonated because they represented a kind of straightforward authenticity rarely found in modern cinema. His influence lives on in contemporary action films, neo-westerns, and vigilante thrillers. Directors and actors continue to cite Bronson as an inspiration, and his most iconic films remain staples of the genre. Above all, Charles Bronson endures as a symbol of resilience, determination, and the timeless appeal of the underdog who rises above adversity. Bronson's transformation from character actor to leading man, one of the most remarkable journeys in Hollywood history, is Bronson's shift from a supporting actor, often cast in tough, silent roles, to an international leading man. Throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, he frequently appeared in war films and crime dramas, usually as the rugged member of an ensemble. Though his performances were consistently strong, Hollywood initially struggled to position him as a star because he didn't fit the conventional mold of a glamorous leading actor. Yet Bronson's unconventional appeal became his greatest strength. European directors and audiences saw in him what American studios had missed: a man whose weathered features, real-life toughness, and understated acting signaled authenticity. His success overseas forced Hollywood to reconsider him, proving that true star power doesn't always come from polish but from presence. The intelligence behind the tough guy image. Despite his stern demeanor, Bronson was far more thoughtful and introspective than many realized. Colleagues often described him as a quiet intellectual, someone who read widely, spoke multiple languages conversationally, and held deep opinions about art and storytelling. He viewed acting as a craft rooted in observation. Rather than adopting mannerisms or theatricality, Bronson studied human behavior, especially that of working-class people, and infused his characters with subtle gestures that reflected real life. His understanding of silence as a dramatic tool helped redefine how protagonists could be portrayed. Physicality and stunts. Bronson's roles often required intense physical performance, and he embraced these demands fully. Even into his 50s and 60s, he performed many of his own stunts. His athleticism came naturally. He boxed in his youth, was physically conditioned by years in the coal mines, and maintained a disciplined lifestyle throughout his career. This physical authenticity became a signature quality, allowing him to play believable fighters, gunmen, and action heroes without relying on exaggerated choreography or stunt doubles. His fight scenes in films like Hard Times are praised for their realism, grit, and emotional weight. Bronson's relationship with fame. Unlike many stars of his stature, Bronson viewed fame with detachment. He was uncomfortable with public attention and avoided interviews whenever possible. To fans, this only enhanced his mystique. He was a reluctant hero not only on screen but in reality. Bronson preferred privacy, living quietly with his family between projects. Those who knew him well recall a man who was polite, soft-spoken, and deeply protective of his loved ones, a stark contrast to the cold, vengeful characters he often portrayed. Impact on the action genre before the rise of modern action stars in the 1980s. Bronson helped define what an action protagonist could be. He paved the way with a grounded, realistic style of action, emotionally driven conflict rather than spectacle for its own sake, characters shaped by trauma, loss, and personal codes of honor in many ways. Bronson was a bridge between the Western heroes of earlier cinema and the urban, morally complex action heroes of later decades. His influence can be traced in everything from Clint Eastwood's anti-heroes to the gritty realism of 21st-century American action films. Influence on directors and actors. A diverse range of filmmakers and performers have cited Bronson's work as inspirational. His roles in Once Upon a Time in the West and The Mechanic are frequently studied in film schools for their minimalism, intensity, and visual storytelling. Directors often praise his ability to let a scene breathe, to allow moments of silence to speak louder than dialogue. Actors such as Jason Statham, Liam Neeson, and even Keanu Reeves owe part of their screen persona to Bronson's template, the emotionally restrained, quietly powerful figure who acts with precision rather than bravado. Bronson's place in pop culture. Bronson's face and persona have become iconic beyond the silver screen. He is frequently referenced in comic books, animation, music, and even video games. His likeness has inspired characters in The Simpsons, the recurring Bronson, Missouri gag. Graphic novels and manga, Western-themed video game characters, action film parodies and homages. His influence has become part of the cultural vocabulary, a shorthand for stoic masculinity and relentless resilience. A final look at his enduring appeal. What makes Charles Bronson timeless is not just his films but the ethos he represented. He stood for perseverance in the face of hardship, integrity without fanfare, strength rooted in lived experience, not showmanship. Bronson's journey from poverty to global stardom embodies the American dream at its toughest and most humble. His films continue to resonate because they speak to universal themes: justice, survival, dignity, and the quiet determination of an everyday man confronting extraordinary challenges. Further expansion: the life, career, and legacy of Charles Bronson. Early struggles that shaped a legend. Bronson's childhood remains one of the most challenging backgrounds of any major Hollywood star. His family, Lithuanian immigrants, lived in extreme poverty in a company-owned mining town where money was scarce and opportunities were rare. Bronson once recalled wearing his sister's hand-me-down dress to school because they couldn't afford clothes. Experiences like these built the emotional armor that later became central to his persona. His entrance into adulthood was defined by hard labor. At age 16, he started working in the mines, performing some of the most dangerous and grueling tasks imaginable. These early years shaped not only his physical endurance but also his worldview, which would simmer beneath the surface of many of his characters. A war hero before he became a movie hero before his acting career began. Bronson served in World War II as a tail gunner in a B-29 bomber, one of the most isolated and hazardous positions on the aircraft. He flew in multiple combat missions and earned a Purple Heart. The discipline and bravery required for the role left deep marks on his personality and contributed to the courage and determination that audiences later associated with him on screen. This military background also gave him an authenticity that resonated when he played soldiers, mercenaries, and fighters throughout his career. Viewers sensed that he wasn't performing toughness, he was drawing on lived experience. Becoming the face of a changing America, the 1970s were a turbulent era in the United States. Filled with rising crime rates, uncertainty, and a general public dissatisfaction with institutions. Bronson's rise to prominence in this period was no coincidence. Characters like Paul Kersey in Death Wish embodied the frustrations many Americans felt. His performance wasn't polished or theatrical, it was raw, internal, and emotionally heavy. His films tapped into the anxieties of the era, reflecting fears about crime and social disorder. Though the Death Wish series remains controversial, it remains a cultural touchstone because it directly reflected the American psyche of the time. The duality of Bronson's screen image. One of the most fascinating aspects of Bronson's career is the contrast between his stern cinematic image and his real-life personality. Off-screen, he was soft-spoken, sometimes shy, often introspective. He valued privacy deeply and disliked Hollywood glamour. Those who worked with him noted, he avoided parties, preferring quiet evenings at home. He was polite but reserved, often keeping conversations minimal. He was extremely loyal to friends and coworkers. He had a dry, understated sense of humor. This duality, the fierce on-screen Avenger versus the gentle private man, added to his mystique and made him even more beloved. The European films that elevated him. Though many think of Bronson as an American icon, his superstardom began in Europe. French, Italian, and even Japanese audiences revered him more than the U.S. did in the early years. European directors appreciated his nonverbal acting style and cast him in films that emphasized atmosphere, visual storytelling, and character psychology. In these movies, Bronson had room to develop complex figures defined by silence, trauma, and emotional depth. Key European-driven films include Once Upon a Time in the West, Italy, USA, Rider on the Rain, France, Adieu l'ami, France, The Valachi Papers, Italy, USA. His success abroad eventually forced Hollywood to recognize him as a major box office draw. His work with Jill Ireland, an unbreakable partnership. Jill Ireland was not only Bronson's wife but also his frequent co-star and creative partner. Their on-screen chemistry brought warmth to Bronson's characters, often softening his otherwise stoic demeanor. Ireland played roles that pushed Bronson into more emotional territory, allowing audiences to see his character's vulnerability. Their marriage, lasting over 20 years, became one of Hollywood's more stable and admired unions. Bronson famously promised Ireland's first husband, actor David McCallum, that he would marry her, and ultimately did. Despite the unusual beginning, the couple remained devoted until her passing. Ireland's battle with breast cancer was one of the great tragedies of Bronson's life, and her death in 1990 deeply impacted him both personally and professionally. A quiet exit from Hollywood. Bronson's final decade in film was spent largely in television and smaller-scale features. Though critics were often harsh toward his later films, he continued working because he loved acting, not fame. His last role in Family of Cops 3 marked the end of a career spanning nearly 50 years. After retiring, Bronson withdrew from the public eye, spending his time with family at his home in Vermont. He remained private until his death in 2003, leaving behind a legendary reputation untouched by scandal or controversy. Why Bronson still resonates today even decades after his peak. Charles Bronson remains a cultural force because his characters reflect genuine emotion and moral struggle. His screen presence is timeless, quiet intensity never goes out of style. His life story represents resilience in its purest form. Modern action heroes draw heavily from his archetype. Whether as Harmonica, Paul Kersey, Cheney, or Arthur Bishop, Bronson created characters rooted in real human experience, not fantasy. That authenticity keeps his films alive for new generations. Further expansion. The depth and dimensions of Charles Bronson. Understanding Bronson's emotional range beneath the stoic mask. Although many casual viewers remember Bronson for his stern expression and sparse dialogue, those who study his films closely recognize that his characters often carried profound emotional weight. Bronson was not a performer who relied on overt outbursts. Instead, he used micro-expressions, posture, and silence to convey grief, the haunted eyes in Once Upon a Time in the West, loneliness, the solitary drifter roles that defined much of his early career, inner conflict, the disciplined assassin of the mechanic, moral burden, Paul Kersey's transformation in Death Wish. Behind the stillness of his performances was a man who understood suffering on a personal level. His portrayals resonated because they were grounded in real emotion, not theatrical displays. A career built on persistence, not privilege. Bronson's ascent to stardom was unusually slow compared to his contemporaries. While many actors found fame in their 20s or early 30s, Bronson's major breakthrough did not come until he was nearly 50. His perseverance is a testament to his character. He endured years of typecasting in small roles. He refused to change his look or personality to fit Hollywood expectations. He relied on his work ethic rather than networking or publicity. Bronson's story proves that success in Hollywood can come from determination rather than traditional glamour. Bronson and television, a crucial platform early on before he became a film icon. Bronson appeared in numerous television series during the 1950s and early 1960s. These roles allowed him to hone his craft and explore diverse genres, including westerns, crime dramas, and frontier stories. Notable series appearances included The Twilight Zone, General Electric Theater, Gunsmoke, Have Gun, Will Travel, Wagon Train. He also starred in the TV show Man with a Camera, 1958 to 1960. Where he played a former combat photographer who solved cases using his skills and instincts. The show demonstrated his leading man potential long before Hollywood fully recognized it. The westerns that helped define his persona before the urban action era of the 1970s. Bronson built a strong foundation in westerns, a genre ideally suited to his quiet intensity. His presence fit naturally within landscapes where men spoke less and acted more. Key westerns include Jubal, 1956, The Magnificent Seven, 1960, his breakout in the ensemble, Guns for San Sebastian, 1968, Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968, his masterpiece, Chatto's Land, 1972, Breakheart, Pass, 1975. These films helped define the myth of the silent wanderer, a theme that would follow him throughout his career. Bronson's unmatched chemistry with Sergio Leone. Bronson's collaboration with director Sergio Leone marks one of the most iconic actor-director partnerships in film history. Leone initially wanted Bronson for the lead role in A Fistful of Dollars, but Bronson turned it down, believing the script lacked substance. The film eventually made Clint Eastwood a star. Leone never forgot Bronson and cast him as the mysterious harmonica in Once Upon a Time in the West. It was a role tailor-made for Bronson, minimal dialogue, maximum intensity, a tragic, poetic backstory. A symbolic presence rather than a conventional hero. Harmonica remains one of cinema's most compelling silent protagonists. The cult of Bronson, fans, fandoms, and iconography. Bronson's fanbase is among the most loyal and distinctive in film history. Several factors can
Bye bye. Thanks for watching. Bye.